I just want to tap in with a quick video. Normally, a YouTuber doesn't want any kind of music in the background, but I almost hoped some of that song got captured in there because it was giving me an idea. What I was thinking is that this I actually want to make a little bit of a case for angels in this video. If you think about it, a lot of life is like a great ocean because all things are unified, and an ocean doesn't really have any form other than its unity and then its waves. But the waves are temporal and fleeting. They can be beautiful. Actually, the experience of harnessing a wave is one of the most, because a lot of human beings, we just like power. If we're being honest, we like the sensation of power. A greater sensation of power than exerting power over other people is to harness current. So if you've ever, I have not been surfing. I would imagine that surfing would be one of the most brilliant experiences a human being can experience. Even rivaling and approaching that of sexual activity would be of surfing, I would imagine, because you are connected and at one with the ocean. So can I get that to go? Because you are connected with the force of the ocean, but also the unity of the ocean when you go surfing. I can appreciate that because I've been boogie boarding. So when I was a child, I visited my family in actually the same region. I'm just getting back from Southern California, and sometimes my family member would do cool things like take me boogie boarding at the ocean. No one really taught me how to do it, but I just go out there and copy them. And boogie boarding is like surfing, but you're just like on a body board like that. But you can actually feel the ocean like that. But it's interesting that there's no sensation of power or joy without being attended by danger in some way. So as you're boogie boarding out there in the ocean, you potentially could get your backside bit off by a shark, and that might be about the worst way that there is to transition. If I would have to imagine the worst way, it would be getting bit by a shark, and that could happen to even my little self there as a child, because there's no this life, it doesn't pull any punches when it comes to nature. But that experience of boogie boarding is about the most brilliant experience. But I want to say there's one other experience that's similar and equally brilliant in this life that you could say rivals and approaches that of sexual activity, and is actually from the outcome of sexual activity, but not necessarily attendant and the same thing as sexual activity. So what I want to say is that if you can appreciate all of this life as an ocean, so there is nothing outside of there's nothing outside of this existence that we know of to exist. This existence at essence can be appreciated as energy. Anything that you would appreciate as form is flowing. So everything is flowing and is energy in motion. That something would appear as form, as being a form. It's actually more so of a wave in that it's a temporal. It's like a slower rate of form of motion. So if you see something that's a solid object, it's still in motion. It's still actually in wave form. But that range of its motion, it gives it the appearance of stability. So it's a stable appearing wave, but it's still a wave that whole time. So from that standpoint, that may be what Arthur Avalon is expressing in some of his works, such as Principles of Tantra 1 and 2, the Serpent Power, which refers to Kundalini energy, and the World as Power. Some of his work is brilliant because he combines spiritual principles with some actual scientific rigor in what he's saying. And then he also has one called Hymns to Kali, which is like a poetic, but he appreciates that all things are both heterogeneous and homogeneous, that is unified and the same, homogeneous, but also distinct. And that's what hetero means, like different. So distinct. So if you say you are heterosexual, you're attracted to that which is different. If you are homo, that means that which is same. But all of life is really actually both homogeneous and heterogeneous. And maybe the quintessential example of that would be an ocean. An ocean is completely unified, homogeneous, but it's also distinct in the actual the iteration and the appearance of waves. But the waves are actually of a deeper phenomenon, which is the unity with the current or the gravity and the pulsing of that's really deep like that. But the sensation of harnessing a wave like that is beautiful. But then also, if you appreciate that all of life is unity, all of life is connected. Anything that you would say, do, think, and or be, it potentially and does to some degree, it can be appreciated, affect all of that exists, is influenced, attendant, defined, possible, viable through all that has existed. impacts all that is existing and could potentially further impact the forming of all that may yet exist. So anything, any phenomenon, howsoever grand or small, is actually implicated, a part of, and from that standpoint, the same as anything to have existed. So what we say, do, think, and be, it affects one another. So it must actually be calibrated and checked for there to be congruence and viability of what we have of life. I appreciate that as the atmosphere. You could actually say that maybe from the ocean to the earth to the atmosphere is all technically the same thing, because all is unified in the first place, but it's just like a different range of motion. That's almost like solid, liquid, and gas. It's the same like that. But then it's also heavily regulated and checked. So if you just appreciate the surface of the earth, now all that we understand and experience may be the most superficial of life, because you can only imagine if there's this much. They say, like, so you have trees that stand upon the earth, but the trees actually go deep in their roots, and their life come from their root, you could say, and the connectivity may be deeper under the earth, and the purpose may be under the earth. Some people have told me that they appreciate that the trees may be like some form of nodes on the earth, and when you have lightning going on, so lightning strikes trees. That's what we appreciate most blunt, crude, superficially on the surface. But there may actually be a connection between the static electricity of the earth, the trees as nodes, the earth as some kind of grounding component, and then actually communication with what is beyond that we can't define or appreciate. There's something of communication in electroactivity, similar to actually like the nodes of nerves, because your body has like afferent and efferent nerves that give and receive impulse. But a lot of that, the structure of that is very similar. It could be a very simple analogy. The actual structure and function of the human body in electrical terms, especially with the nerves and their structure, and then the trees, the earth, the electroactivity of the sky, and that being some form of communication. But then also us as human beings, you can say that a lot of what we've come to be, it comes from our experience around trees, but it may actually be to service the earth in trees of some kind. But then also, if you just appreciate the surface of the earth is finely managed with a fine-tooth comb would be an understatement. If you go out to the middle of nowhere and you break down or you pull over or you squat or you hike, you will see that each last inch of this earth is attended by fine, detailed care. More detail, more attention, more effort, more grace, more sincerity would be an insect or a small creature managing some plot or degree of earth, more so than a human being. So the earth, it's finely managed like that. But then you could say that also so is the atmosphere, because you have different grades of things that would exist within the atmosphere, but can also be appreciated as the atmosphere. Flies, insects, birds, even sometimes plant material, like say a seed like a helicopter seed, or like a cotton. If you just watch cotton linger through the air, sometimes it's more graceful and even more conscious than you would appreciate a living being, and it may actually be just a different degree of range. So how did birds learn to fly in the atmosphere? Maybe they actually are the atmosphere. Who would actually know? Who would be wise enough to manipulate the atmosphere so as to accomplish aviation? Would it not actually be the atmosphere itself, in fact? So from that standpoint, you can appreciate anything that would be in the air, even us as standing upon the earth within the air. Anything that would be in the air is the air and is the atmosphere. But most things exist on a range, a grade. So what you have for something physical in front of your face, whether organic or not, they say organic is based on the viability that's possible through molecules, especially as that relates to carbon. So what you have as sentience, consciousness that you can appreciate as a living organism, you're saying it's organic. That's some of what's possible through carbon. But that's still that's from the thickness of it, that would appear as a physical object that you can perceive and manipulate, but also appreciate as being conscious. But then if you take but that too, if you break it down finer, it's just energy. But that is physical. It's in a crude, gross form, but it's still energy. From that standpoint, you can appreciate that anything that you would see in the air, that's in the air, one is that it has a purpose, but two, it's a grade of thickness it's a grade and range of thickness that is waveform. As we appreciate it as conscious, it's sentient based on carbon, but it's still a degree of thickness. That's what you can see with your eyes. It would figure that if you can see something with your eyes, there would be a finer range of that you could not likely perceive with your eyes, as you're in the habit of engaging your eyes. So from that standpoint, there could be any manner of thing, of energy, that would be in the air, viable in the air, and also checking activity as the different things in the air check activity. Sometimes I think that the purpose of birds is actually to distract us so as to keep us coherent and sober. Because if you think about it, you say, someone walks in, you say, oh man, that fool is high. That you can appreciate that person's high. They're not knocking anything over, they're not bothering anyone, but you're bothered by them being high. Why are they high? They're high because they're not calibrated into the normal range of thinking and activity that comes from thinking behavior that a person is under ordinary circumstances. That is, they're not checked by the same distractions and pretensions and perceptions that a normal person is. So from that standpoint, they're high, as that they're not calibrated. That can be enjoyable, but it can also be difficult to maintain homeostasis and proper conduct among other human beings and beings. From that standpoint, I think that some of what actually keeps us sober and sane in what we would call sane is actually some of the distractions within the atmosphere. So you just walked outside and you heard a bird singing prominently. Beep, 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 beep. It actually, you didn't appreciate how fine it just distracted you from whatever train of thought you were going on. It somewhat kept you grounded into this reality, the activities of this reality, the rhythms of this reality, the cadence, no less than the birds. You were checked by that, but also calibrated and balanced by that. If you were under the influence of a substance, you may walk outside, that bird singing, but you didn't even perceive it because you're on another wavelength. Now you're becoming and experiencing and appearing high like that. So I just want to say that what we have for atmosphere, it's not limited to what we appreciate as sentient, organic beings, but it is different manners of calibration and checking, and also distraction that can be appreciated as energy. The activities, purposes, motions, cadences of energy, as that would be an organic living thing, but also maybe finer, such as like when you see cotton floating through the air, is that the grace of that, it's almost near about sentient or conscious, even surpassing that, because anything that we can perceive, there's a range of things. So there's a range of what we can appreciate as conscious, but there may be something more than that and less than that and the same as that we cannot perceive, and that might be what you're appreciating as what you would call it angelic or something of that. And I don't mean this with religious connotation or indoctrination, but just that there's different ranges of activity and purposes and energy, as such that it could reason that we may not perceive a lot of it, and even that what we do perceive, we don't perceive it still its real purpose and function, even as that's impacting our activities and outcomes. But what I want to say is that from the standpoint of appreciating the ocean as maybe the greatest experience that you can experience, it would be harnessing an ocean. According to Osho, is that one of the beauty of life is that if the ocean is balanced and then there's wave within the ocean, so as one thing rises, another falls. An analogy of that is a human being, the different things that you would contribute in sacrifice to another human being. Likely someone younger than you, your actual cognate, like your child, maybe a sibling, a cousin, or even a community member going back in the past, because some of our concept of the nuclear family, I think it's related to feudalism and inheritance of property along feudal lines, that is nepotism, amounting to gentrification and imperialism ultimately. But it may be different than the actual real experience and purposes of nature before some of the implications of feudalism, and also the self-interest of feudalism that balances and skews the real balance and purposes of life and blessings of life. A modern example of actually self-interest, that is personal private property, and the privilege of that interfering with human happiness and health, would just be our preoccupation with cars. We take a car, when you say car, that's automobile, that's self-mobile. So your self-mobile, you do that, it makes you more comfortable. You can be viable with that economically, but what actually makes you comfortable makes you less healthy. It can be appreciated. Part of aging is from comfort. The more comfortable you are, the more you deteriorate. So by our preoccupation with the automobile, which is attended by and implicated, enforced by some of the rigors of our modern feudalism, you actually become less healthy because you simply walk less. I was talking to my stylist, and she said that her mother-in-law, her grandmother, lived to be near about 130 years in Africa, if someone can believe that. She said that a lot of that was, and also at that point of 130, she didn't have health complications or wear glasses, and she walked all the time. So that's an example of how some of the implications of private property, self-interest, feudalism, it interferes with the purposes and the real experience and the balance of life that actually makes life enjoyable, sustainable, and healthy to a later age in the past. So some people say, oh, this one's 100, this one's 130. That's profound. That actually might be what a human life is without some of our amenities. But another one is this community, is that we have a concept of the nuclear family and family in general that's different than what community might have been. But according to Osho, is that there's a deep beauty in as one wave rises. So in order for one wave to rise, another must fall. That's like raising children, but also caring for and looking after children. As you invest and sacrifice for a child or just another person, you somewhat diminish yourself and they increase. That may be the most beautiful experience of life, is to fall, is to decrease. In this life, we're more so trying to build ourselves up and to amount to different things. But maybe the most that we can amount to is just competence, learning, discipline, and love, and actually giving those up or relinquishing what would come from that to another's benefit. That might be the deepest experience of beauty par excellence, almost as beautiful as harnessing a wave. That is like the sensation of power, rivaling and akin to sexual activity, as in wave surfing or boogie boarding. The deeper, more sublime may actually be to concede as a wave, to concede that which we have to another's benefit, like that. And so I had an opportunity like that. I've made some references on this channel to different atrocities that I experienced. One thing, to besiege a position is considered a war crime, because what's more traumatic than actually combat is the threat of combat. That is the sensation of being outnumbered, outgunned, laid upon, stalked. One of the actual most traumatic things in life may to be stalked, whether or not there had been physical violence. And it were physical violence to attend that, even violence to property, it amps that up. So I experienced something like that as a saga over many years. But as that was happening, I had the opportunity to bless young people like that, first in my own life, but then as a profession. That, for me, that was the experience of actually dying as a wave because in a lot of that experience I was dying, having that much trauma and fear about being like stalked for that long by a group. But then also this life is balanced, so you get this much of pain and fear and torment. The exception proves the rule. So on balance, there would have to be a blessing that comes through that, or an opportunity. For me, that was to give back to young people. And I just want to say that, I just want to make that analogy that may be the most beautiful experience in life. Harnessing a wave, but more so decreasing as a wave or into a wave, may be the real blessing of this life. But then all that is still the ocean, which is connected, but it's also calibrated. And if you appreciate the ocean and the earth and the air as one existence at different ranges of a waveform of motion, giving the sensation and the properties of liquid, solid, and gas. Within that, it's regulated and checked and calibrated. So I think we are calibrated on all levels: psychologically, socially, personally, emotionally, organically, physically. We're calibrated on all that, such as to make life viable, and that amounts to atmosphere. And I think we may not appreciate all the range of atmosphere, the purposes of atmosphere, the members and agents of atmosphere. A lot of it we can perceive on the surface, but we don't understand much of what we can perceive. But there may be more that we do not perceive and also do not understand that makes life viable. And that might be what people have sensed and referred to with that concept of angels. Likely most cultures have had some version of appreciating what's called an angel, and likely the negative counterpart, because most things are balanced like that. So I just wanted to give some insight and just some food for thought with this video like that. Peace.